Today, we're going to see if this old GPU, a 3080 Ti, is still good in 2023. Very, very smooth. Look at that. Completely consistent. Oop, I just got hit by a car here. But still, look how consistent it's staying. This is Ray Tracing Ultra, or at 4K, by the way. Is your new GPU worse than this? This is DLSS 3. Look at stuff, people popping in and out. Look at that. You see it? Not doing anything. Look at my hands. Look at my hands, I'm right here. With new GPU prices being very expensive and some GPUs having some big limits out of the box, let me give you guys one big example. I know the 4070 Ti, I talk about it all the time, 192-bit memory bus. I never even looked at that a few years ago, but now it's becoming important. Do you know why I never looked at it? The 3080 Ti, even though it only has 12 gigabytes of VRAM, that's a number we always look at, right? When you're buying a GPU, you're like, all right, 12 gigabytes of VRAM, 16, 24, we're very familiar. But the memory bus bandwidth on this guy is 384 bits, just like an RTX 3090. And the 4070 Ti, 192 bits. They did it like that because it has 12 gigabytes of VRAM. You either get more expensive, the 6X variety VRAM, like in something like this, or you have to do a cheaper one if you're going to do 12 gigabytes. Otherwise, you'd have to do 16. But why would Nvidia do that and compete with their other 4080? Remember, 4070 Ti was originally a 4080 as well. And a great place to look for really good deals on a GPU like this is going to be from today's sponsor, Jawa.gg. I've actually used this myself. It's a marketplace where you can buy and sell, similar to something like eBay. It's going to be a lot more curated, and they have a lot more focus on making sure that the marketplace is somewhere that's fair. It's going to be safe, that has a lot more real gamers involved. Today's GPUs being so expensive, if you have a marketplace like Jawa, you're going to have lower fees and a lot of seller and buyer protections. New buyers can get $10 off their first order with the code WELCOME10. Happy shopping, and I hope you find some awesome GPUs. Does it really matter? Isn't 12 gigabytes of VRAM the same? Not really. Imagine it being like a highway where you're trying to push through all of the graphical stuff that especially Nvidia wants us to use. Ultra, ray tracing, in the future path tracing, all of that stuff to go through here. You need not only a lot of VRAM, you need fast bandwidth to move it along, just like a highway. So does that mean that the 3080 Ti has some advantages over a newer GPU? I mean, obviously, RTX 4000 is going to beat this in frame rates for the most part, but this is actually pretty close in some games to even the 4070 Ti. The 4080, of course, is going to beat this. It's not even in the same comparison, but it's also much more expensive. This one gets kind of close to the price of an RTX 4070 Ti. If you take that MSRP at $799, these used, you can probably find for as low as like $650, $700. It's going to have to be used, but that's the reality of the situation. And how's the performance going to be like? Well, I threw it in my system. I tested it on a few games. Even if you look at other YouTubers like Hardware Unboxed, when they did tests with the new game like Hogwarts, this is pretty close actually with like the max settings. Let's say if you're going to get like 64 frames per second on a 4070 Ti, you may get something like 60 frames on a 3080 Ti. That's not really all that big of a difference. So in terms of like the brute force and performance, this is going to be within a certain margin that's not really too unreasonable of a GPU like the 4070 Ti. Of course, the big thing here is going to be DLSS 3 and DLSS 2. In my opinion, DLSS overall is definitely a great technology in a lot of games, especially when you're playing like 4K. You can use this GPU, and while a GPU like this isn't going to have DLSS 3 with frame generation, which is reserved only for RTX 4000, you can still do DLSS on something like this, and it makes a huge difference in a lot of games, in my opinion. When I was playing through Hogwarts, if I don't have DLSS on, especially at 4K, it's going to crush this GPU. I would have to, go down to 1440p or something like that. But if you're playing something like even Cyberpunk, which is even more intensive in terms of ray tracing, you turn on DLSS on like balanced or sometimes even quality, you're going to get a huge boost in performance. Most of the time, I can't see any issues. To be fair, when I did throw the 4070 Ti on, it looked really good in Cyberpunk. In Hogwarts, this performed great, the 3080 Ti. But take a look at this. I threw the 4070 Ti with DLSS 3. Now, this must be some type of bug. I know this section of the map is buggy. It's still showing some issues. Look at that slowdown. Some artifacting, people popping in and out. Look at that. That is very weird. This is DLSS 3. Look at stuff, people popping in and out. Look at that. You see it? I'm not doing anything. Look at my hands. Look at my hands. I'm right here. You see? The people are popping in, and look at that. Look at all these lines. I mean, it's using VRAM. I mean, it's over 10 gigs, and the allocation is 11. It's not like it's running into that limit. I wonder if DLSS is making that 192-bit memory bus kind of crash in. I mean, our CPU is only 5% being used, and look at that, 5.5 gigahertz. So the CPU is fine. The GPU, 100%. And it's really, look at this. Whoa. Look, my hands, I'm not even touching it. Let's say if I move around, look at how much it stutters and stuff popping in and out. I thought DLSS was going to make it better. Like, what's wrong here? This game is a little bit funny, but it worked well on every other GPU that I tested it, and even the 3080 Ti with DLSS worked well. It worked well on the 4090 with DLSS 3, so I don't know what's going on exactly with the 4070 Ti, but it absolutely went bonkers when I put on, frame generation, Nvidia Reflex, of course, with DLSS 3 on the 4070 Ti. Now, other parts of the map were a little bit better, and they were fine, but the 4070 Ti, like I've been saying, it's been having some issues, and maybe even with the DLSS 3, it's the only GPU that's going to exhibit that type of behavior because it has that 192-bit memory bus. Who knows how that is interacting with DLSS exactly? DLSS definitely has interactions with the VRAM. If it limits some or lets some go on some other metric, is going to be something that's technical we're going to have to take a look at, but maybe it's doing something that's the other GPUs are much different. Like the 4080 is going to have faster, memory bandwidth as well as the 4090. So the 4070 Ti right now is the only DLSS 3 frame generation GPU that could potentially run into issues we're not going to see anywhere else because of that limited memory bus. I'm not saying that's what it is here. It could be some interaction between the game, that particular spot in the game, but other GPUs have run well, and I even tested this in the exact same spot, and while the frame rates were low, it wasn't doing all of those artifacts, and the frame time graph wasn't going crazy. So having taken a look at this, knowing that it's going to be within that like 650, 700 range used compared to a newer GPU, of course, don't forget on the AMD side, you have the 7900 and 7900 XTX as well that have a lot better VRAM, 20 gigs and 24 gigs respectively. What do you do? Is this something that's still usable in 2023? In my opinion, if you get this cheap enough, and even if you own one now, I think it's actually really, really good, especially if you're playing single player games, stuff like I was showing, Cyberpunk, Hogwarts, Plague Tales Requiem. You can definitely, put DLSS on here. It's not going to be frame generation, but you're going to get a nice performance boost, and it's going to give this GPU a lot of life. I still think if you get it at a good price, it's still a great GPU in 2023. Even though it's 12 gigabytes of VRAM, that's really at the limit right now. It is at least 384-bit bandwidth, so that's a positive towards it. It's not the same type as is on the 4070 Ti. It's much, much faster. It's like a 3090 or 3090 Ti. So that's definitely a plus, and it's going to be a little more future-proof than other GPUs. Although, I will say that going forward, you should be looking at GPUs with at least 16 gigabytes of VRAM and nothing that has a big memory bus limitation. You want to get at least 256 bits like the 4080 and up, preferably more in the 300s like this guy has, but that's going to, depend on the price of the GPU. Might not be realistic depending on what the GPU makers want to put out. Even the Arc A770 16 gigabyte has faster memory bandwidth than the 4070 Ti. So that shows you some of these older GPUs like the 3080 Ti, they're still completely usable. I'm throwing this at 4K with Ultra and ray tracing. Not everybody's going to do that, but that's going to be what pushes these GPUs the most. Well, I guess there is 8K, but that would be ridiculous. Even though some people think 4K is ridiculous, a lot of more people have access to 4K TVs and 4K monitors. It's not like it used to be. And it shows the limitations of the GPU that may start to come to fruition even in 1440p within a year or two. So it's a good way to see how future-proof these GPUs will be. You drop drop it down to 1440p, this is an excellent GPU for that resolution. It would compete very closely with some newer GPUs. Of course, frame generation and things like that are not going to be available, but that's really going to be your only drawback. But otherwise, these GPUs are definitely made really, really well, and they have some pretty good specs. And remember, 3080 Ti is not even like the 3090. It's a little bit more cut down, but for gaming, it's definitely one of the best of last generation. And in my opinion, it still continues to be really good if you get it at a good enough price. All right, guys, so remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.